Okay, I have 3 o'clock on my watch, so let's get rolling. This is the December Oregon Business Analysis Networking Group Forum, last one of 2020. So welcome everybody to this. And let me change my slide. Hold on. I am talking faster than my fingers are moving. Today we have an amazing speaker, Jennifer Colburn from the Portland IABA chapter, is speaking today for us about traceability. So if you're like me, you've got your pen and your pad handy, and let's get rolling. I will hand it over to Jennifer. And go ahead, Jennifer, and share your screen, and we'll get going.
All right. Thank you, Tim. I'll go ahead and get this in presentation mode for everyone. And Tim, thank you for being MC. I'll be relying on you to help monitor the chat, so that way you can tell me if there's any questions posted. I will pause after each slide to see if there are any questions in the chat. And I'm going to turn off my camera though, because my screen with my PowerPoint is the other way, so all you'd see is the side of my face.
Yep, and just a quick reminder, sorry to interject, we are recording the session, and we have the materials that Jennifer's using for her slides, and those will be posted up to our website and the recording on our YouTube channel shortly after the presentation.
Perfect, thanks. So you already saw my bio. I do have to mention that I am a senior business systems analyst at PGE, but my views and opinions are my own and don't represent that of PGE or my coworkers. I am the president of the Portland Metro IABA chapter, and prior to COVID, I enjoyed traveling and hiking, and now it's mostly just hiking. So if anyone knows any little known hikes that aren't too crowded, ping me afterwards and let me know. I'm definitely interested in those. I was practicing business analysis before I even knew what business analysis was. So it's been a little over 20 years now. And I'm sure some of you have also just become business analysts without even knowing what it is, fallen into it. So today we're going to talk about traceability. So the dictionary definition of traceability is just, being capable of being traced. And it really allows you to connect the dots from one point to another, both forwards and backwards. So why is connecting the dots important? Besides business analysis, it's actually important for a few other things, such as national security or public health. This is an old cartoon. If we remember back, it's almost 20 years since 9/11 when we lost nearly 3,000 people. The FBI and CIA were accused of not connecting the dots, and so this is where this comic is from. They didn't, they had all this information that could have prevented the tragedy in hindsight, but it just was never connected into a cohesive picture. And of course, it is not as easy as one of those connect the dot kids games. So we'll be talking about ways that we can do traceability for requirements. Another way that we use traceability in our day-to-day lives, if you've ever been to the supermarket and received a notification at the bottom of your receipt about a prior item that you were purchased being recalled, you can thank produce traceability for that. The FDA and CDC, when they issue food recalls for E. coli or salmonella, they actually will print out at the bottom of your receipt, or even call you if you have a customer card with the supermarket to let you know that the products you've purchased were contaminated. So that's a public health way that we see it. And also now in COVID, we have contact traceability. So traceability is really everywhere these days. And do we have any questions in our chat?
I don't see any yet.
Okay, cool. How many folks are familiar with the BABOK? If you can raise your hand in the chat. All right, we've got lots of people. Great, that's awesome. I love to see that. So traceability appears 45 times in the BABOK. The task of planning and business analysis includes plan traceability approach, and there's actually a task of trace requirements. That's a key component of the requirements lifecycle management, and it's also mentioned in define requirements architecture. So glad to see everybody is familiar with the BABOK. It's always so nice to see. So I'd like to get a little bit of background on everyone here so I can kind of tailor this presentation or spend more time on different areas based on what methodologies folks use. Agile, waterfall, or Scrum or Fall, Agile-ish, that's somewhere in between. Any tools that you use for road mapping, requirements management, user stories, testing, and traceability. If you just post that in the chat, we can see where folks are.
Jennifer got one answer, both Agile and Waterfall.
Is that simultaneously? Good old Excel, tried and true. All right, I'm looking over here. It looks like we've got a lot of folks that are straddle both worlds. The hybrid Agile waterfall.
Another Excel lover there.
It's totally legitimate tool. We've got Azure DevOps. Smart Sheets, there we go. Got some Jira users out there. No one said anything about loving Excel.
I guess as an Excel lover, I assume others are too.
We've got Word and Jira. Visio Graphics, oh, that's one I haven't heard of. TFS, that's a good one. If folks are on Microsoft. ADOS, I'm not familiar with that one. What is that? Ah, there you go, Azure DevOps, perfect. All right, looks like our chat has slowed down a little bit. So today we're going to talk about two different types of traceability that can be used for IT projects if you're more of the waterfall side of the house, or for IT products if you're more of the agile side of the house. Enterprise traceability is understanding how the project or product traces back to your organizational strategy or your product roadmaps. And requirements traceability takes those enterprise objectives, and then you have your business, functional, and technical requirements that get traced through design and coding all the way down to your use cases and test cases. So the requirements are really that connector between what the business wants and the solution that's actually delivered to the organization. So they're like the linchpin to have complete traceability. Some companies actually have software that traces your organizational objectives all the way down to lines of code so that they can capture the value and the ROI of these projects. But for companies that don't have that, it can still be done in less automated ways, like our Excel spreadsheets. So if you have a business requirement that can't be tied back to your product roadmap or organizational strategy, you should probably ask, why are we doing it and what is the value? And what I didn't ask folks is how many business analysts we have versus QA, Scrum Masters, product owners, and product managers that we have on the call. But this is applicable to everyone because everyone kind of has a piece of this puzzle, and it applies to everyone on the project team. Do we have any questions? All right.
All quiet in the chat.
Cool. So we'll first delve into enterprise traceability, and I will tell you we're going to touch super briefly on enterprise architecture and business capability because those are huge things in and of themselves that you can have like week-long seminars on. But the idea is just going to give you a quick overview of those three key concepts. So enterprise analysis is understanding the big picture, defining the business goals that the solution must meet, and integrating those requirements into the larger business architecture, which will be able to support initiatives and long-term planning. And then it's used in strategic planning, business case development, cost benefit analysis, your feasibility studies, market analysis. So these things all fall into the chapter on strategy analysis in the BABOK 3.0. So it can apply to an enterprise, a division, a department, or even a product, project, or an iteration if you're down at the sprint level. For this presentation, I'm going to start at the top from enterprise analysis and go all the way down. But you should be able to start at any point along the way and trace up or down. So your department goals should map back to one or more organizational goals, the same with your product or project. And the enterprise analysis really answers, why are we doing this? But most organizations don't have a big picture just hanging on the wall somewhere. So where do we actually find our big picture? Do we have any questions before we move on? All right. Or does anyone actually have a big picture hanging up in their office? All right. So where you can find the big picture for enterprise analysis is usually in your mission or vision statements. Also, WIGs or BHAGs. I don't know if any folks there use either of those terms. WIGs are wildly important goals, which is a Franklin Covey term. We use that at PGE. Also, BHAGs are big, hairy, audacious goals, such as the moon mission. I didn't make this up. It's a thing. People use it. I think Amazon does. Got to have our acronyms, right? We have product roadmaps that are the product vision. We should have some type of organizational department or portfolio strategies, maybe in our PMO. There's also strategic plans, initiatives, and KPIs at organizational level, all the way down to maybe even your department. Some folks have success factors. Some people have balanced scorecards. They're all different ways of figuring out what the organization is doing. Hopefully you won't have all of them. You'll kind of have a couple of places to go to look for it, and hopefully they'll line up with each other. But that's really where you can find these things. If you don't have these artifacts, you can always go to your product owner or business partner and find out what goals they're being held to, the metrics that they're responsible for, and those should provide insight into the business goals and objectives. Are there any other examples, any other acronyms that I've missed that anyone uses for the enterprise level? All right. And Tim, I'm going to ask you to post the link to the Zachman framework into the chat because there is a lot of information on this one image. So if folks can't zoom in and they want to go to the website to see that, The Zachman framework for enterprise architecture is a schema or taxonomy that's used in enterprise architecture, and it asks what, how, where, who, when, and why across the top. And then the stakeholders are on the left. So it looks at executives and business management, architecture, engineering. So you've got your business systems and technology on the left and your classifications on the top. And this model shows that there's distinct perspectives. So each row is a distinct perspective on each of those classifications. But the deliverables from each perspective have to give enough detail to translate into the level beneath them in order to define that solution. So every level needs to understand the constraints of the other level, and it has to be decomposed in such a way that the next level has the building blocks they need. So what you end out at the end on the right-hand side is your models for scope, business concepts, system logic, technology, physics, tool components. And then so what you end out with is your enterprise architecture. So that the why column is really what provides the business drivers for all the other columns. And that really helps with the motivations. And I know this is a lot of information, but this is just, I want to give one example of enterprise architecture. Oh, so we have someone who posted thematic goals and the advantage framework that's used at OCCU. All right, so some folks actually have frameworks.
Yeah, and just before that, Jill posted ODHS and OHA use key performance metrics. Pretty similar to KPIs and balanced scorecard, I think.
Okay. So folks do have a place to go when they're trying to find their enterprise architecture. So any questions on that before we move on? Like I said, there's entire week-long seminars on that, and it's just one taxonomy that helps you define your enterprise architecture. Cool. So then the other key component, which also has whole entire webinars devoted to it, is the business architecture maturity model, BAM. Cool name, not as cool as BANG, but it's close. And it delivers a roadmap that measures an organization's business architecture capabilities. So on the left-hand side are different capabilities, and at the top are different levels. And you figure out, hey, what level do we want to be at? So those little black boxes are the target state. And so they basically give you a roadmap. They do the analysis. What's your current state? Where do you want to get to and your next horizon? And then where's your ultimate goal? And then it allows your organization to focus on a few of those at a time so that you can eventually become as mature as you'd like to be. Those upward progressions through the levels correlate to your organization's ability to visualize, communicate, and monitor how your business objectives are being pursued within the organization. So it's more, it's not the actual work, but it's showing where you need to go in your business capabilities. And business capability analysis is actually one of the techniques in the BABOK. So if you want to actually purchase the Business Architecture Maturity Model, you can get that from the Business Architecture Guild. There's a lot of consulting firms like S2E Consulting, where I snagged this graphic from, that actually help you implement this in your organization. But even if you don't have something like this, you can still be able to chart your organization's business architecture and your maturity in that. Thanks, Tim, for posting the link.
It looks like the first BAM link that I posted was missing a character and didn't work, so I reposted.
Awesome. Thank you. Do folks, do any of your departments or areas actually have business architects or business architecture posted anywhere that you can refer to?
I know my organization does have a business architecture, and we've even got an individual whose job it is to maintain the business process architecture.
That's really helpful because it's not a once and done, right?
Yeah, they're constantly changing, especially since the business process specific documentation. That's the stuff that changes pretty much daily.
Does anyone have any questions on where to find business architecture if they don't have it defined? All right. I'll move on then. So now that we have our enterprise architecture and our business architecture, let's talk about enterprise traceability. And that's really making sure that either the project that you're working on or product, if you're more of the agile mode, addresses a critical business need and delivers value to the stakeholders. So you can use enterprise traceability in even determining which projects should take priority. So if your goals are to increase revenues and decrease costs, and you have several projects that meet one or more of those, you can figure out, okay, we have 8 projects for this year. Our team only has the capacity to do 4. Which one should we actually implement this year? So that traceability is really key in figuring out whether or not you're working on the most valuable project and helps to prioritize them. Do folks have any questions before we talk about how we can document it?
I don't see any yet.
Cool. So how do we document this enterprise traceability? Again, depending on what your team uses and if you're Agile, Scrum or Fall or Waterfall. In the Agile world, you may have a product roadmap. If you're in the Waterfall world, you may have a charter. The charter should have clearly stated business objectives and a scope, and there should be SMART goals in there, specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. You may also have a cost-benefit analysis or some ROI done, and you may have some change controls within your organization. And that change control is important because it can help define the relationship between IT components and your business goals or objectives. And these artifacts are important because they prove project value to an organization. Like when someone's like, why are we doing this? And they can point, well, we figured out, here's our ROI. They can also assist program managers in that if a business rule changes, Thomas is talking about all the business rules changing on a daily basis. So if a business rule changes and it affects multiple projects, it's a lot easier to determine if the impact across all selected projects as it relates to resources and your budget. There's also, totally lost the presentation. Is it not appearing for folks?
I'm still seeing slide with the title Documenting Enterprise Traceability.
Presentation document. Did you? Okay. So we'll keep going on. The Informal traceability is also really valuable. So understanding how the project that you're working on fits into the big picture benefits the entire project team and also helps improve team morale and motivation. So if project team members understand the relationship between the stakeholder needs and what they're doing, then they can really understand the value that they're adding. Any questions on enterprise traceability before we move into the fun part that I know all the business analysts love, requirements? All right. So this is the definition of requirements traceability, the literal definition from the BABOK. And it's really all about the lineage of each requirement. So going backwards and forwards and its relationship to the other requirements. And it really helps ensure that the solution conforms to the requirements. And then it can also assist in scope, change, risk, time, cost, and communication management. So it really, even though it's just about requirements traceability, actually impacts all those other areas of a project. It's also really helpful in detecting missing functionality or to identify if there's implemented functionality that's not supported by any requirement, any of those little gold platings that kind of work in there because someone said, oh, we want this. And then everyone's scratching their heads later, like, why did we do this? So like this was not valuable to anyone, but we spent all this time on it. Traceability really enables faster and simpler impact analysis. So when those business process changes, you can figure out what's the impact. It also is really reliable for figuring out any inconsistencies and gaps in your requirements, because if you have a business requirement that has no technical requirement, then something was missed somewhere, right? And it also, depending on how deep you go into your traceability, it can really highlight the scope and complexity of a change. So hey, we just want to change this one thing here. And you're like, yeah, well, that's going to affect 5 other things downstream, one thing upstream. And this is how much time that it's going to take. Or here's the other stakeholders that will be impacted by this request because it's not just you. And it also really helps you address which requirements have been met and which haven't. Any questions on requirements traceability? Cool.
I don't see anything.
So when you're tracing requirements, you're analyzing the relationships between the requirements, design, solution, work products, and that helps you with your impact analysis, coverage, and allocation. So there's a couple different types of relationships, and the level and complexity that you go into identifying this really depends on the size of the project and the value in it. So you may or may not use all of these, but deriving just as simply when a solution requirement is derived from a business or stakeholder requirement. So it just links requirements on different levels of abstraction. The depends, there's 2 kinds of depends. A necessity, so when it only makes sense to implement a particular requirement if a related requirement is also implemented, otherwise you wouldn't do it. And then effort, when a requirement is easier to implement if a related requirement is also implemented. And satisfy is super simple. It's just, it's usually between your implementation element and the requirements that it's satisfying. So the functional requirement and a solution component that's actually implementing it. And then validation is for our QA folks. So that's the relationship between a requirement and a test case or use case or anything else that you're using that figures out whether the solution fulfills that requirement. Any questions?
Nothing's up in the chat yet.
So why do we do requirements traceability? It helps prevent that scope creep or gold plating because you make sure that every functional requirement has a business reason for doing it. It helps in delivering a complete solution because every business requirement must be satisfied by a functional requirement, a technical requirement, and a use case or test script. The line items in those test scripts can be chased back to functional requirements, which makes it really easy to update test scripts when functional requirements change. Not that they ever change, but we know that they often do. We change our mind, we change our business process, now our functional requirement changes. Traceability provides that solution, the foundation for solution evaluation. Does it do what it's supposed to do? And then it also helps in identifying missing requirements because you can figure out, hey, if you don't have something above or below it, then maybe you missed something. And especially those depends on like, hey, if it's depending on something else, where is that requirement? Making sure it's in there. And it really helps our project managers and our product owners in prioritization and planning. So that way, and also understanding those dependencies also help. And then it really helps mitigate risk through your change management processes when our business processes, requirements, people, decisions, timelines inevitably shift during the course of a project. Was there any other value that folks have found out of requirements traceability besides those? And this information should really be shared with your entire project team so that they have visibility into the why as well as what needs to be done if priorities change. Post-project accountability, such as audits. Yes, that's a good one. I'm sure the auditors all appreciate that, right? Does anyone have an example of requirements traceability that really helped them that they'd like to share? All right. So,
Just a comment on that, Jennifer.
okay. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Or on something else. Aids in the testing process down the line.
Yes.
And then could also assist in lessons learned.
Yeah, those are great.
And I know for me, with the DMV system replacement project that just finished, the vendor we hired includes traceability in their requirement management software. So when we got to the end and our QA vendor said, okay, where's your traceability? We were able to just package it and give it to them. We didn't have to put a whole lot of work into it at that point.
Oh, wow. Yes, it wasn't an Excel spreadsheet that someone had to slave over forever.
I think for me, on a project that I'm working on, the traceability has helped because so many of the current team members don't have working on project experience. It's a new experience for some of the more technical members, and so it's been good to reference that when we've been in meetings and decisions. And it's also, as we've done traceability, because it's not a typical software development project, we're able to better define what our design deliverables are, and for the user documentation has been most helpful.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, so your tech writers appreciate that too, huh?
That would be nice if we had them, but yeah.
Your business analysts who write the documentation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so we document traceability through a matrix. So a traceability matrix can be one of many things. It can be a button that you push at the end of the project because you have software that does that for you, or it can be a standalone document, part of the requirements document, part of the test plan. Basically, it's anything that ensures that completeness of testing and provides the basis for test planning. And also just needs to be able to associate the business and functional requirements with the use cases and test scripts. And then it also needs to be done in such a way that when a business requirement changes or priority changes, it can be identified and easily updated throughout all of your documentation. And again, this is where that the analysis that we do is so important, because what you're actually producing really needs to depend on the level of traceability that makes sense based on the scope of work and what's actually valuable to trace. So it's valuable, but we still have to balance that number of relationship types with the benefit gained by representing them. So when we trace requirements, we have to figure out, okay, how much time am I spending on doing the requirements traceability versus the value of that? And then the nature and use of the specific relationships that are created. Because we looked at those 4 different types of relationships, but the level that we go down to really is going to depend on the level of formality and also the number of requirements. Because when you're dealing with a huge number of requirements, that effort is going to expand exponentially. Any questions before we move on? So for all of our Excel lovers out there, or even people who don't love Excel but are forced to use it, you can use Excel. So here's an example of, the relationship of your driver to your satisfier. So your requirement to your use case or test script. And the way Excel isn't that good is because a lot of times it can be one to many, many to one, or just one to one. And Excel's really good at the one to one. It's the others that make it a little more complicated. And in order to trace things, you actually have to have unique identifiers. So your business requirements and your functional requirements and your use cases and test scripts all have to have a unique identifier that allows you to match them up. Really, you need to make sure that your business requirement is decomposed to the smallest package and assigned a unique identifier. And then each business requirement would have one or more functional requirements. Each functional requirement would have a use case, test script, just depending on what your team actually uses. So for those folks using Agile, you could trace from a roadmap to an epic to a user story to a test case, and you could use a spreadsheet to track those using their unique identifiers as well, if your software doesn't already do that. Here's another example. So depending on what you call the work that you're doing. I know someone said they weren't working on a typical software development lifecycle. So if you're working on specifications and designs, you can use those words. So whatever, if you've got user journeys for our Agile folks, you can map each user journey. So as long as you're have your rows and columns, you can use Excel to do anything. Does anyone have any examples of their favorite Excel traceability matrix that they'd like to share?
Like rows, and do you want like columns or
oh yeah, just the types of things you're tracking.
Well, one of the things that we've tracked is to we did a work breakdown structure and broke it down to the different packages. And so one of the columns is tracing back to that WBS to make sure that we have alignment there, and then tracing to our end user documentation.
Cool. So that's the WBS that your project manager has helped facilitate.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, nice.
We don't use Excel. We use Smartsheets for our requirements. Our Smartsheets guru had to work really hard on me to get that to happen. But one of the really nice things is that it all rolls back up into monthly reports for scope based on when requirements are completed. And within there, we match the requirements back to our original business case and the objectives in the business case.
And Smartsheets allows you to have that one-to-many and many-to-one relationship, right?
Yes, it does.
Yeah, so that's a definite advantage over our old-fashioned Excel.
I know we included development tasks or development items in our traceability as well, which was nice because when test cases or test scenarios were failed, it was really easy for the developers to trace that back to which piece of code was it that needed to be looked at.
Yeah. This example is one where it has the code module. So it's like, what's important for your group to be able to track and what makes sense, right? And if you're on a project where things can be broken down into those modules on the coding side of things. Anyone else have any other examples? All right, so I know Tim had mentioned something earlier about his software doing it. So JAMA actually offers bidirectional traceability, and it has your trace matrix, your impact analysis, and your coverage explorer. So it like does all the things. Jira, and if you're using X-Ray for your testing suite with Jira, there's a traceability report. So depending on if you're also using one of those add-ons for Jira for your test cases, you may actually have that built in. I know I saw lots of folks who said they were using Jira. And that traceability looks at your requirements and your related test cases and test runs. So it's like, hey, this user story hasn't been tested. This bug hasn't been tested, and gives you that information if you're using one of those add-ons. AHA. I don't know if anyone uses that for road mapping. They have a dependency map in there, and version 1 uses has a visualization. And then there's even some tools that offer real-time impact analysis. So those folks that are using Jira, are you using any of the add-ons for your testing?
Just got a no in the chat. Only response so far.
Yes, so that traceability report only works if you have one of the add-ons for testing within Jira. Otherwise, it doesn't have anything to really trace to. So Tim, do you remember what tool it was that they used that gave you the awesome little report to package?
It's actually their own proprietary software that they designed. They use it for managing the whole project, including the requirements and the development items and everything. And we just get to keep it when they're done, so it's kind of cool.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah.
They get tired of using Excel spreadsheets, I guess.
Yeah, I don't know if they actually ever used Excel spreadsheets. They probably developed something on day one to manage their stuff.
Oh, those little startups that are agile and nimble and haven't been around since the dawn of time.
Yep, it's one of those.
Are there any other tools that folks are using?
I know that aside from our project to replace our system at DMV, we've used Alexis Teams to kind of manage change requests and things like that, and tried to do a little bit of traceability in there, but it hasn't worked real well.
Awesome. That brings us to our next slide. So some crowdsourcing of things that have worked well or maybe haven't worked so well, best practices, any valuable lessons learned on traceability that anyone wants to share? Or anyone that needs help with traceability and has a project that they'd really like to learn how they can apply traceability to it. Or is everyone asleep because it's almost 4 o'clock in the afternoon on an overcast day?
Looks like we just got one question in. Has anyone tried using a list in Microsoft Teams for this?
I would like to.
Teams might just be new enough for most of us that we haven't had a chance to explore all of the possibilities.
Yeah, Microsoft List is kind of a fancier Excel spreadsheet.
Cool. Well, while everybody thinks about that one and whether or not they might have a response, another question, how do you judge how much effort to put into tracing and traceability?
So, John, that's really going to depend on the size of the project or the product that you're working with, and how much time you have and that value of what you're doing. So is it a super complex project? And if it is a really big project and you're going to spend all of your time figuring out just managing the traceability, and if stuff is constantly changing, then you might want to do just high level. But if it's also something that is really critical, and if anything gets missed, or if this is a customer facing product instead of just one that we're using internally, that also may figure out like how much you're willing to not trace and kind of let slip through the cracks. But it really depends on the level of time that you have to do that and what makes sense based on the size of the project.
I personally like to think of it as a cost benefit type of analysis.
Yeah, like how much value is the project going to get out of your effort, right?
Right. And it looks like we got a response to the Microsoft Teams from Aaron. We've been using the planner in Teams, which has been working pretty well to track some smaller projects and also multiple projects between different groups. And then we have a question from Tammy. I didn't forget about you or your comment. We have just started drafting requirements. What would you suggest we do to make sure we are successful long-term in traceability?
Well, the first thing is to make sure they all have a unique identifier, because if you don't, then the rest of it's going to be really hard. So the first step would be making sure they're all uniquely identified. And then depending on if you're using software to track your user, like I saw some folks that were using Team Foundation servers. So there's some tracking and traceability that's built into that. So it really just depends on the tools that you have at your disposal. Are you an Excel lover? Okay, yeah. And using Excel is totally fine. Lots of us do. And it just goes back to that previous slide of depending on how you're organized and set up, just figuring out if you have, user stories and test cases and code modules, or if you have business requirements and functional requirements and use cases and test scripts, just figure out those things that you need to track and put them at the top of your Excel spreadsheet, and then make sure everything's uniquely identified so you can match them up. So, whatever, if you said you're getting the requirements now, so it sounds a little more waterfall. But just get those column headers for the things that make sense to track for you, because you've got to get everybody in on it, right? You've got to have if you're tracking code modules, you need the developers in on this too.
All right, Tammy said thanks, perfect. And we've got a question or a comment. We've used RTC RQM doors to track requirements and design docs. I'm not familiar with that one personally.
Yeah, Gil, do you want to come off mute and share that with us?
Hi, I just was, I believe it's a Microsoft product, but we've used that at our project and along with Excel to track. We track requirements via Excel, but we also use the RTC and RQM application to link the scripts and the requirements to the design docs. And it's worked pretty well for us.
Cool. So you're actually linking the documents with that?
Yeah, we link our test scripts and our requirements and our documents via that tool. So that makes it kind of nice.
And do you have individual documents for like each test script, so you have that one-to-one relationship?
Actually, we have it's one-to-many. So basically, if we have a functional document, there are many requirements that could be linked to that, and also test scripts, depending on what you're needing to have tested. So there's often more than one test script per the requirement. It just depends, on what we're testing. But that's been something that's been helpful. But I know on other projects that I've been on in the past, we've used the Team Foundation Server, TFS.
Yeah, a lot of times it depends on what tools folks are always using, especially the developers, right? Because if they've already got something that they're using that, or that what the testers are using that we can plug into, then you don't have to start from scratch.
Yeah, and we've also been using Microsoft Teams for other stuff. One thing that we've found helpful, just as it relates to our business analyst team, is the wiki feature, to where we can post, there's the files and the wiki, and you can post information there for information sharing, which has been handy as well. So.
Great.
Yeah.
You don't happen to know what RTC RQM stands for, do you?
Oh gosh, I'm not sure if any of my other coworkers are on this call, and for some reason I'm drawing a blank. Probably because I need another cup of coffee this afternoon.
Oh, rational. Yeah. Okay.
Good job, Leanne. Yeah. Oh, it is an IBM product. Yeah.
All right. Leanne gets the prize for acronym finder.
Yeah. Yeah.
Was
Yeah,
there
but
any
it's
other?
nice that it's all, you can put it all in one, like, where you've got the requirements and the test scripts and the design docs, because it makes it nice that it's all together as a package. Oh, go Google. Love it.
And here's Joseph with the other half of the alphabet soup rational team concert. All right.
Mhm.
Were there any other tools or tips anyone wanted to share? All right. So the summary is that we just need to make sure that what we're doing provides value. And the best way to do that is make sure they're aligned with the business goals. Enterprise traceability is going to provide that alignment to your business goals and requirements. Traceability is going to make sure that we're delivering that quality solution that meets the business needs. And then the extra bonus that we get out is in the inevitable changes, we have an easier way to manage those changes. Any other questions that anyone has on traceability or how they can implement it even with Excel? All right, I think it's a wrap then, Tim.
Okay, well, I know everybody joined me in thanking Jennifer for presenting for us today. Yep, it's already popping up in the chat everywhere. So thank you very much, Jennifer, for joining us all the way from Portland on our Teams meeting, although you're probably not the only one on here from Portland. But those of us in Salem appreciate it that you're participating, and thank you very much for the presentation on traceability. I will bring up my screen again then, and let everybody know that our next BANG forum will be February 18th, and the topic is going to be developing a business case, and the presenter Rebecca Craven from DAS, and we will again be virtual through Teams in February until we get a more firm go-ahead from the powers that be for meeting in person. We will continue to do these via Teams and collaborate as best we can through this medium. Also wanted to share that we will be sending out basically our annual survey about BANG to see how we've been doing this past year and ask for some feedback and some input as to what we can do this upcoming year. We do believe in continuous improvement, so we will be reaching out for input and feedback on a regular basis with you guys, probably annually. So that survey, you can look for that coming out early January. Figure we'll give you all the holiday off, and then we'll hit you hard with surveys in January, which everyone else is probably doing the same thing. So please don't ignore our survey, ignore all the other ones. Also, I just saw a comment, the slides will be up on the BANG website. We have those from Jennifer in a PDF, and we'll put those up. And I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Jennifer, but that PDF does have all of the links clickable in it. So if you didn't get them in the chat as I was pasting them in, you can click those links. If not, just copy paste them.
They should all be clickable. I tested like the first few, but I'm not QA.
Perfect. Well, we're all BAs. I think we should be able to figure things out, right? So I think that is it for today's session. Oh, nope, I almost forgot. Joe, you would have been yelling at me. And Joe just shared the link for the Bang website in the chat. So if you don't already have that, hopefully you do. And if you haven't already signed up for our listserv so that you're getting our regular emails and our newsletter, which we send out on the months that we do not have a forum. So you'll be getting a newsletter in January if you sign up for the listserv. You'll also get the invites for these through that and job announcements as they come up and any other communications. And we will be adding to our website here soon a form for prospective speakers. Folks that want to speak at a forum can submit through there, kind of like an application, although I'm not sure we want to call it an application because we're open to just about any speaker that wants to speak. So if you'd like to speak or know someone that would like to speak or that you would like to speak, go ahead and have them go to our website. There should be a link up there pretty soon for that form, and they can fill that out, and then we can figure out which month works best for us and them for them to speak for us. Anybody know of anything that I might have missed? Joe or Brittany or Winnie or Jennifer?
I think you got it. Thanks, Tim. And thanks, Jennifer.
All right,
Thank you
then.
for having me.
Yeah, thank you very much, Jennifer. And hopefully we'll have you or some of your other Portland members soon as well. And everybody have a great holiday then. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to all of you. And we will see you in February.